If you're a creative person watching this, here's a quick reminder I want to give to you. Whatever you're doing right now is harder for 90% of people, and you should give yourself more credit. Every time I make a video is always a battle between second nature and frustrating learning. Everything from getting an idea, thumbnail making, scripting, recording, sluggishly editing, scrambling for B-roll, fighting with your editing software because something always happens, and exporting to upload. And yet, I always forget about how many people never even finish step 1. As I've worked up to and refined this workflow, I've gotten more thoughts about the possibility of a team, whether it be editing or some other department. Whether it be music or manga or movies, art in the professional world is inherently collaborative, just like any other job. Budget and especially timing had to be taken into account, but it all goes towards a smoother process and generally better output. But what if you didn't do all of that? What if you had the notoriety and the wealth to fund other people, but still decided, nah, I'm gonna do my own thing? So I wanted to talk about a few figures that choose this path, articulate why they do so, and examine how it informs our artistic identity to gain a better perspective. So without further ado, let's get into it. I don't think T-Pain is talked about enough for how many facets he occupies himself in, at least on YouTube. I'm past a generation that was playing bartender and I'm sprung nonstop in the club, so while I've heard T-Pain passively on radio and stuff back in the day, it wasn't until his YouTube popped in my recommendations where I got acquainted with his contributions in the industry. And the contents of his channel feel like the antithesis of every assumption I've made regarding an industry musician simply due to how open he is. We're in an age where some artists livestream their progress, but due to how multifaceted he is, he takes it a step further. Some producers might do live streams in the crib or the studio, but this guy will just stream the making of a whole song, from finding contact plugins to layering final vocals. Maybe someone will record some behind the scenes footage for their music video. This guy will be like, hey, let me show the whole process of how I 3D animated one of my music videos on Blender in a month. There's very few people who offer this generous of an inside look to their creative process, especially one who's been a part of the music industry for over 20 years. Now, while he went independent in 2019, he's always been heavily involved in his own creative process. The reason he went independent, however, was to detach himself from Reliance. He has a whole video explaining the inciting incident, so I won't say too much, but in short, his label at the time found one of the easiest promotion opportunities ever. If you follow mainstream hip-hop or just modern music at all, you're most likely well acquainted with a plethora of artists with strained relationships between their labels. But T-Pain's situation was so uniquely awful, he made the decision to get on with his own business, locking in on his previously neglected duties. I recognize how many people watching aren't with labels, and I have no experience with the industry, so I'll keep it brief. Payne in this video talked about how he wasn't reading emails or contracts, establishing a level of negligence that gave his label no confidence in their client's future well-being. And Payne even admits how right their judgment would have been had he not put to work to involve himself more. For me personally, I saw parallels between Payne and Doechie's predicaments. Whereas Doechie's struggles were messing with her quality of art, Payne's struggles were messing with his line of business. And both stories made me realize that a common ground should be set between both to be successful, depending on your definition. Obviously, your craft should be number one on your priorities, but not understanding or paying attention to contracts or basic business terms locks you from so many more opportunities. I know some artists had the dilemma between which side should take precedent, but if you're serious about pushing your work past just passion, which is fine by the way, you gotta be about your bread too. JPEG Mafia has always been a looming anomaly to me. I've seen his name pop up more and more throughout the years, but never decided to check his stuff out until one of his Genius interviews. Before he even establishes any context, he says that the decision to create everything himself is due to necessity, and how he prides himself off of it. There's multiple bars in LP that references the stain with critics and producers biting his style. But back to his Genius interview, he lists clients not being organized and not being able to afford mixing and mastering. And the latter had me think about the topic of accessibility considering the time he started putting music online. Now, before listening to his stuff, I knew he went by a different name back in the day, but I wasn't aware of how locked in he was with that online blog era of hip-hop. His later projects under the JPEG name would reflect this, but with more polished production. I allude to his previous persona because of how impressive his work was out the gate. With projects like Dreamcast Summer Songs and the Ghost Pop tape, his knack for sampling and arrangement is still seen as innovative, with the former even being debated as one of the first vaporwave projects, period. It's the experimentation of that era responsible for why we can have tracks like Rock and Roll is Dead and Hazard Duty Paid made by the same person and not sound out of place. And going back to accessibility, his first few projects came out in a time where platforms like Instagram and Snapchat either didn't exist or were just gaining traction. The way he started making beats was simply going to the ends of songs and replaying countless times, trying to comprehend each element from there, likely an archaic method by today's standards. Another thing he mentions in the interview is how the amount of involvement within his creative process is threatening, against the grain if you will. Like I said earlier, art in the professional world is collaborative, and with the sheer amount of positions that need to be accounted for, it's unconventional for one person to continue to do it all in a professional setting. Don't get me wrong, I'm well aware of the many aspiring artists with nothing but a PC or even a phone and mic to make a product. It's just not common to keep that same level of independence in the industry. JPEG lists mixing as an example, straying from the tips of other people listening to a mix, and getting different perspectives of different ears to presumably have a cleaner track. This by itself isn't even a bad tip, but his specific workflow to creating music allowed him to come up as one of the most unconventional artists in the space. I can't honestly list another rapper before or during the same era whose music I can confidently point out gives the type of energy that JPEG does. And that's a huge advantage in establishing artistic identity. This is not to say to never listen to anybody else about your work. The last thing anyone needs is more figures surrounded by yes men. But the confidence in his creative process and vision allowed him to dominate an energy that is distinctly him. The next person on this list may confuse you a little bit, but before that, I need to grab some water. I'll be back. So when I posted a work in progress of the thumbnail asking my followers on Instagram what these guys had in common, I knew this guy would be a curveball, so let me explain. Cory has over 20 million subscribers, and that's the most I'm talking about his stats because I'm not about to pocket watch. But even with his time and size on the platform, he stated multiple times that he still edits his own videos and refuses to have anyone else do so. The reason he lists is the inability for others to properly emulate his style. In my last video, I talked about studying art using the realm of hip-hop as a reference, but one thing I failed to mention was the intentions of doing so. When you're looking at an inspiration to learn from, the goal shouldn't solely be to imitate. No matter what medium like digital art or even music with actual numbers and parameters involved, you'll almost never truly be able to emulate a piece because you're just not that person. You don't have their sensibilities, their habits, their exact taste. You don't have their brain is what I'm trying to say. Ideally, a study should be to use their decisions to strengthen your own understanding and skills to make more educated decisions regarding your work. So I completely understand where Cory is coming from. However, another thing I noticed when watching his older videos is the change in his software, or lack thereof. There's a video of his old setup in 2014 where he mentions using Bandicam to record and Power Director to edit, and 10 plus years later he uses the exact same thing. Why? When he listed some of the criteria for Power Director, I decided to make the assumption of versatility as well. If you're an editor by trade or hobby, you'll know that Cory doesn't do a lot outside of some distortion or meme placement. My guess is that this makes things easier if you had to switch to a different software. So like with me, I currently use DaVinci Resolve, but up until December of 2023, I was mainly using Sony Vegas. The main reason I switched was my growing over reliance on plugins. So for the video editors watching, I would do basic cuts on Vegas 14, then pair them with Universe and Sapphire plugin transitions, and that's a part of why my older videos felt the way they did. However, as I got a new PC and later a new laptop, I didn't want to rely or worry about downloading old plugins and stuff on newer machines without something messing up or something breaking, when I could just get a new program that has all those features built in. My timelines are not complicated at all because I prioritize the most basic features when editing. Multiple layers, chroma key, decent keyframe system, preferably one with a spline graph, and support for local fonts. That's it. Not to say that I won't or don't want to create more involved effects, but I always try to make sure that 90% of what I do is transferable in any application. So if I had to switch for any reason, whether it be a major buyout of a company or something, I don't waste time unnecessarily adjusting to a jarring setup. Now, for this last figure, I'm assuming the selection is throwing even more people for a loop, but hear me out. Where the West has struggled to truly find a boy band with as much global appeal as the 2000s and previous decades, the world of K-pop is the complete opposite. When I was explaining the concept of the video to some of my friends on my birthday, one of them quickly mentioned BTS's early works, which was a surprise. While I'm still slowly trying to understand the industry at large, what I was able to find is a complete contrast of ethics, standards, and training, all reflecting a completely different working culture in regards to artist development. So when I did some research on a few of the members, I was shocked at the specifics of some of their origins, in particular Gusty. aka Suga. As soon as my friend put on Hangum, I knew I had to take a look. When doing some research on the members in the group at large, the news that he was an underground rapper in the Korean scene suddenly checks out. His self-titled debut mixtape was the culmination of just wanting to create music. The project came out 3 years after BTS's debut, which was already receiving critical acclaim in South Korea. In an interview with Grazia, he made sure to emphasize the project being more for himself, wanting to remove it from music rankings, company promotion, and etc. A decent amount of the project was being worked on in between shows in various hotel rooms whenever he had the time. Even just dropping it on SoundCloud initially, I have a lot more respect for how intentional the music was, especially given the position he was occupied in at the time. I think the track 724148 exemplifies this, as it's a stripped back recollection of his origins and frustrations working to get into Big Hit and beyond. With the new context of his humble beginnings and his continued interest in production, I had to give my props. At the time of release, BTS didn't have nearly as much hold in the West as they do today, but the group was only a few months from really making history in their industry. So taking all your free time from already hectic hours in writing, recording, producing mainly by yourself is admirable. There's multiple interviews in which he shows just how tapped in he is with the creative process, how much he actually loves music. His live stream on V Live, where he talks about his second mixtape D2, was filled with details and anecdotes of his mind process over the near 4 years in production. Even if you aren't familiar with Korean hip-hop or anything, I highly recommend you give it a watch. This persona he adopted is less of a contrast to Suga and more of a deeper look into his thoughts and mentality surrounding his upbringing in the world at large, and the lengths he took to release 2 mixtapes in the rapidly changing position he was in. To hone so much of his wants and needs at the time without as much label input, that's passion and dedication without a doubt. Despite everything, creating a piece of work for the world just because you wanted to should never be taken lightly. And for any artist watching, you especially shouldn't take the time and effort that you use to output anything with a nonchalant or scary attitude. We're leaving that mysterious nonsense in 2024. What I'm saying is, treat your work with more gravity, because if not you, who else will? While I recognize many more creators that apply to this description I've established, I more so just wanted to share my fascination with the decisions of the guys still choosing to take matters into their own hands. Whether it be precision, your current position, or simply just pride, it puts into perspective just how much more difficult it is to do it all. When I first saw Igor's cover with the words "all songs written, produced, and arranged" next to a singular name, I couldn't fathom how one person had the time, energy, or perseverance to finish that project. But after doing this for a while and gathering a better understanding of how these people make things, it's got me to reflect way more on not just the way I work, but how I can improve my workflow in my current position. If you liked this video but didn't feel like subscribing right away, I'd really appreciate a comment at least. Comments really help me with criticism on how to improve my videos, as I'm still getting used to being a creator and everything, and also just encouraging conversations about the topic at hand, which is the main point of these videos. If I didn't mention earlier, all my socials are in the description, especially Instagram. That's where I'm the most active on. But other than that, that's pretty much all I have to say. Okay, bye.